our message to the drug traffickers is get the hell out of our country. Your free ride is over because President Trump is back in the Oval Office.
President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice.
Powerful strike against one of the most powerful drug cartels in the world.
At 4 a.m., while most of the country was still asleep, the convoys were already rolling. In Chicago and in 21 other major cities, thousands of agents from the DEA, FBI, and Homeland Security launched into action at the exact same moment. They called it the surge. It became the biggest coordinated strike on organized crime in decades, an operation aimed straight at the heart of the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG. By sunrise, the numbers were staggering. Over 5,000 arrests and more than $200 million in fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and illegal weapons seized from Chicago to the coast. It marked the largest federal crackdown on the Sinaloa and CJNG cartels in modern American history. But the real shock wasn't the mountain of drugs, it was the people wearing the handcuffs. Not just traffickers, not just middlemen, but sheriffs, border inspectors, even federal agents. Men and women sworn to protect the country were helping the cartels poison it.
Fentanyl crisis plaguing communities and destroying lives from coast to coast. Over the past few weeks, we've looked into why the death toll is escalating and the root causes of this nationwide problem. Tonight, we examine how exactly fentanyl is actually getting into communities.
Sinaloa and CJNG don't operate like street gangs anymore. They operate like global corporations. They have supply chain managers, accountants, chemists, logisticians, and armed enforcement teams that function like their own private police force. Their product isn't just illegal, it's industrial-grade poison. In the center of that empire, Chicago. From rail yards and interstate corridors to cargo hubs and airport freight terminals, massive loads move in quietly. Once they land, they're broken into smaller shipments and pushed out across Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, eventually flooding the entire East Coast. The product is fentanyl, so powerful that 2 milligrams can stop a human heart. And the cost? Devastating. Over 100,000 overdose deaths every year, nearly 70% linked directly to fentanyl in Ohio. Morgues are overflowing. Schools in Indiana and Pennsylvania keep Narcan next to fire extinguishers. This supply chain isn't just efficient, it's industrial, anonymous, and fueled by American lives. It took months of intelligence work to piece together the full picture. Quiet analysis, endless logistics tracking, and data pulled from dozens of seemingly unrelated cases. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The cartels were running carbon copy operations in more than 20 U.S. cities. Same stash houses, same fake businesses, same cash smuggling routes, money, weapons, and fentanyl pills circulating like parts of a well-oiled machine. By late 2025, the evidence wasn't a theory anymore. It was a blueprint. And federal agencies began preparing for something the United States had never attempted, a coordinated nationwide strike. They called it the Surge. Phase 1 launched at 4 a.m. on October 15th. The suburbs of Phoenix were still asleep when helicopters cut across the sky. The first breach charge shattered the silence. Garage doors crumpled, flashbangs detonated, and tactical teams flooded in. Within a single week, more than 2,500 Sinaloa-linked suspects were in cuffs. Agents seized $85 million, industrial pill presses, encrypted financial ledgers, and massive storage drums filled with synthetic chemical precursors. But that was only half the war. Phase 2 began 3 weeks later, this time targeting CJNG, the cartel known for expanding through terror and brute force, and the battlefield grew wider. At the port of Long Beach, cranes froze as federal teams boarded container ships marked as industrial cleaning supplies. Behind welded false walls were tons of precursor chemicals, the lifeblood of fentanyl production. In Miami, agents hit waterfront homes and commercial properties tied to a covert real estate web. These weren't bought with cash. They were funded through rotating crypto laundering schemes that quietly pumped cartel money back into the U.S. economy. Meanwhile, in Houston, a convoy of tractor trailers was stopped on I-10. Under crates of lettuce and onions, agents found hundreds of military-grade weapons, AR platforms, 50 cal rifles, conversion kits, gear meant for cartel enforcement squads. This wasn't just drug trafficking anymore. It was a war supply chain. The true magnitude of the surge became clear as 22 federal field divisions struck at once. In Boston, 85 CJNG members were taken down. In Kansas City, 41 distributors were arrested. In New Jersey and Maryland, key East Coast pipelines collapsed overnight. More than 5,000 arrests, over $200 million in drugs, guns, and assets seized, dozens of command nodes dismantled, multiple supply lines severed. But beneath the public celebration, there was an unspoken tension. Agents knew the next battle wouldn't happen in alleys or warehouses. It would unfold inside the system itself, because the war was no longer just against the cartels, it was against the corruption protecting them. While images of raids, seized narcotics, and perp walks dominated national headlines, another fight was happening quietly, deep in financial data. This was not a battle of bullets, it was a battle of bank ledgers, wire transfers, shell companies, and offshore accounts. The money trail painted a picture so precise it was almost surgical. Bribes didn't show up in envelopes anymore. They appeared as government contracts, political donations, real estate investments, a sophisticated method of buying influence from the inside. Federal prosecutors uncovered transfers where the same accounts funding cartel weapons were also making payments to local contractors, campaign committees, and even police union suppliers. For the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, this was the breaking point. This wasn't theoretical corruption. It was structured, deliberate, built into the system. In El Paso, a Customs and Border Protection officer was charged with waving through trucks loaded with drugs and undocumented migrants, using his badge as a shield for years. In Arizona, an internal affairs probe revealed senior supervisors who ignored repeated warnings that a colleague was taking cartel money, burying trafficking cases to protect donors tied to cartel-run shell companies. This wasn't coincidence. It was infrastructure. And the root cause pointed to one critical vulnerability: institutional fatigue. Under emergency orders to secure the border, Homeland Security hired thousands of new agents in under a year. Background checks were rushed. Temporary clearances became routine. And into those cracks, the cartels slipped through. Since 2024, the data has shown a trend that nobody wanted to believe. Dozens of law enforcement officers, from county sheriffs to veteran border agents, were being charged with cartel-linked crimes. The cartels had changed their strategy. They weren't just bribing individuals anymore. They were feeding the system itself. For the DEA and the Pentagon, the mission shifted. The question was no longer, how do we stop the cartels? The new question was far more unsettling. How do you protect the shield when the cracks are forming from the inside? If you're still watching, make sure to like and subscribe. The scale of the threat and the growing evidence of internal corruption forced a historic policy shift. With mounting proof that these cartels were operating like sophisticated terror networks rather than traditional criminal gangs, the administration issued an executive order. The Sinaloa and CJNG cartels were officially labeled foreign terrorist organizations. That single move changed everything. Within minutes of the order being signed, the Pentagon was granted powerful new authority to work side by side with the DEA, and Homeland Security Defense Secretary Pete Heck described it as a whole-of-government counter-terror mission. The message to cartel leadership was blunt. If they behave like insurgents, they will be treated as such. Their networks will be identified, mapped, dismantled, and neutralized. For the first time, U.S. Northern Command was authorized to provide intelligence, advanced surveillance, and limited operational support to domestic law enforcement task forces. Drug enforcement wasn't just policing anymore. It had become an operational campaign. The goal was no longer simply to disrupt or arrest. It was to defeat these organizations to protect the homeland. But even with military precision and the headline-grabbing milestone of 5,000 arrests, major challenges remained. The operation exposed just how strained the system had become, how years of rapid expansion created vulnerabilities that smart, well-resourced adversaries could exploit. And despite every victory, one brutal statistic still hung in the air. More than 150 Americans die every single day from fentanyl and synthetic opioid overdoses. The drug is simply too cheap, too potent, and too easy to mass produce. The supply never truly stops. For decades, the cartels operated in the shadows, poisoning communities, corrupting institutions, turning neighborhoods into battlegrounds, and treating American lives as disposable. They built empires of money, violence, deception, and influence. And for years, it seemed unstoppable. But the surge proved otherwise. It showed that the United States can still unite in moments of crisis, that the badge still means honor, maybe not for everyone, but for many who refuse to be bought. And it showed that when agents, analysts, prosecutors, soldiers, and intelligence officers move with one purpose, the ground can shake. This wasn't just an operation, it was a statement, a reclaiming of national dignity. It drew a line in the sand and declared that it would not be crossed. The lesson is simple. Evil doesn't need permission to grow. It only needs good people to stop paying attention. And in this moment, America's good people did not look away. The DEA, the FBI, Homeland Security, U.S. Northern Command, local task forces across the country, they stood between order and collapse, and they chose to fight.